If you've been painting miniatures for as long as I have, then maybe you know the feeling too. You've spent hours building or even converting your precious perfect little miniature only to take it outside and accidentally turn that bad boy into a thick, cakey, chalky, cracked mess, all with a single, unassuming scoosh of an air-compressed button. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if priming could be fun, but not only fun, but really cool and actually extremely useful too? Well, that's where I come in, because in this video, I'm gonna help you to not only troubleshoot all of your priming problems with some tried and tested tips and tricks for perfectly smooth coats, but I'm also gonna share some of my absolute favorite weird and wacky primer color combinations, from magical synthwave effects and easy vibrant yellows to instantly blended skin tones and more, in order to transform this painting stage that we all love to dread into a fun and easy way to give your miniatures a unique and perfectly blended boost before you've even touched a paintbrush. Whoosh. Let's go. So before we get into all of the fun stuff, I want to make it very clear that whilst I wasn't paid to make this video at all, like nobody asked me to and I didn't get money to do it, I just like experimenting with colors and I thought this would be a fun, useful video to make. I will be using a lot of primers from a company called Colourforge, who around this time last year, I did a little collaboration with where they produced my own custom primer color. And I really don't want anyone to watch this video and think I'm trying to trick them or do some kind of convoluted, not so subtle ad. So to be very clear from the start, this is my Colourforge collaboration primer. It's called Rogue Pink. I think it's the prettiest color in the world, and if you choose to buy it, I do get a small commission. Yay! Additionally, for clarity, these are the other primers which I got sent for free by Colourforge as part of this collaboration, and all of these other ones here and every single other one you see in this video are all ones that I have bought with my own money, including the Colourforge ones, because I am genuinely a big fan of their products. So now, as you're watching this, I can sleep at night knowing that you are all informed and educated consumers who know exactly where everything has come from. Let's go. But with all that out the way, thank you very much, and let's get back to the good stuff. One of the top questions that I've been asked most frequently over my entire career of teaching people how to paint miniatures professionally is, how do I prime a miniature well? And I get why it's such a common question, because it is such an important starting step for the rest of your paint job's journey. Now, I have my own little routine which always works for me to help get the smoothest possible priming coats on my miniatures, and I'm going to share that with you now so that hopefully we can troubleshoot some of your most common priming problems. The first thing that I always do before I prime my miniatures is actually to warm my can of primer up by giving it a little bath, and I know that sounds weird, but hear me out. I'm not super sure what the actual science is here, but warming up your primer just a little bit can help make the paint inside of the can less thick and sticky, and can increase the pressure within the can, resulting in a smoother and thinner coat on your miniatures. The way I like to do this is by running some warm but not hot or boiling water in my sink, and this is important. Please make sure that it is just warm water, because we don't want you exploding or boiling your cans of primer, good lord. Then I pop my primer in the water and I leave it for at least a minute or until the can is nice and toasty. Then it's time for the next and arguably the most important step of all, which is just to shake the hell out of that can. Thoroughly shaking your can will ensure that all of the components inside of it are fully mixed in the way they are intended to be. Now for the priming step itself, and two of the most common mistakes that I always see people make when priming are that they either spray too close to their mini or too far away from their mini. As you can imagine, spraying too close to your miniature results in a thick, uncontrollable stream of primer being blasted right in your miniature's details, which when dry results in that weird kind of crackling effect, which we all dread to see. On the other extreme, spraying too far away from your miniature can cause the pigment in the spray to dry in in the air before it hits your miniature, resulting in this nasty, bumpy, chalky sort of texture, which is no good either. The way I like to spray my minis is to hold them around 15 centimeters-ish away from my spray can, and then I spray in sweeps across my miniature like this. The sweeping motion kind of stops a direct thick blast from hitting any one place on my miniature, and it helps to coat it in a smoother layer. As well as this, something that I personally quite like to do is just to start priming the back of the miniature first, as the front is usually the focal point, and if there's any issues then I'll be able to see it here on the back first before I potentially ruin the front. And apart from obviously picking a well-ventilated area and preferably a non-rainy day to spray on, that should be everything you need to know to ensure a perfect prime job on your mini. But of course, a lot of us live in different climates or living conditions which maybe don't make it as easy to prime miniatures like I'm doing here. So if you do have your own tips and tricks, or if you're struggling in any way, then let us know in the comment section below so we can all help out and learn together. But now that you know exactly how to get the best results out of your primer, let's take a little look at the main technique we're going to use to get the best out of your colors, and that is Zenithal Highlighting. Zenithal Highlighting. Let's go. The word zenithal loosely means a point in the sky directly above an observer. So when we talk about things like zenithal highlighting, spraying, or priming, what we're referring to is a technique in which we apply a lighter paint directionally above a miniature to create an effect which simulates a light source coming from overhead. Which I think I've just made sound more complicated than it is, but I promise it's so easy and it's a great technique to have at your miniature painting disposal. The most straightforward version of this technique is simply to start by priming your miniature black all over, and then using a lighter color of your choice, in this case white, we simply spray from one direction, usually directly above the miniature, in order to give the illusion that the miniature is highlighted from the angle which we sprayed the lighter color from, which, if done correctly, should also preserve all of the darker recesses on the miniature too, creating an instant shaded effect. Zenithal priming like this can make it much easier for you to understand and mock up how a light source will look on your miniature before you paint it. Or it can act as a great starting point to techniques such as glazing, using contrast paints in general, or as the kids call it, slap chopping. But in this video, we are going to be using pretty much exclusively this top-down zenithal spray technique to create some awesome colorful contrast and instant blends on our miniatures. And please remember that all these effects I'm going to show you are just supposed to be fun and colorful ways that you can kind of speed up your paint jobs a bit and add a little splash of color here and there too. And you should absolutely use all of them alongside your usual painting techniques such as washing, edge highlighting, dry brushing, or whatever else you do to make your miniatures feel finished. So let's start with what I think is one of the most universally useful ways to use this technique, and that is painting metallics. The first and most simple way to achieve metallics with a little bit of depth is simply to start by priming your miniature black all over. And then directionally, we're going to spray our miniatures from above with whatever color of metallic primer that you like. But for this example, I have used silver and gold since they tend to be the most common. As you can see, the result almost looks like the miniature has already been shaded. The black base coat in combination with the overspray means that all the darkest details are still black, whilst the lightest areas are all our lovely metallic colors, giving it a shaded effect as if we've used a wash, but with actually very little effort. And of course, this is a fantastic place to start if you're looking to do an army with colored metallics too. For example, a single layer of red contrast paint over this warm metallic gold makes for a perfect and super quick pre-heresy Thousand Suns color scheme. But if this is a little bit dull and simple for you, then one of my favorite things to do is to actually add a little color underneath the metallics. Here I'm using this lovely deep red over black as our first darker color, and then I'm spraying some gold over the top in exactly the same way as before to give this paint job a little bit more warmth. And here I'm still using that dark red, but I'm switching out the warm gold for a cool toned bronze for this very bloodied looking cornate armor effect, which would also work perfectly for instant 40k minotaurs. Using metallics like this in the priming stage, I think, is one of the most universally useful ways to kickstart a bunch of different painting projects that you might have. But let's take a look at some of my other absolute favorite ways that you can add a little bit of color and pizzazz to your paint jobs using just a few cans of primer. Let's start with my absolute favorite color combination, which I tend to show people whenever I can because I just think it's so cool, which is this amazing trippy blue and pink instant synthwave effect. To do this, we're going to start by spraying our miniature, in this case our Thousand Sun, all over with black primer to add a little contrast in the very first step, and so that the deepest recesses on the miniature will look like they are naturally in shadow. And this is something we're going to do with every miniature in this video, so yeah, buy some extra cans of black primer, I guess. After that, we're going to use our very saturated pink primer to do a lighter all over spray. However, when we're doing this, don't try and coat the whole miniature like we did with the black primer. We still want those recesses to be that darker black, so just gently try and spray the mini from a bunch of different directions. Then once that pink layer is dry, we're going to switch to our bright blue and do a very top-down angled zenithal spray all over the mini. Again, trying really hard to only catch those higher points so that the highest parts of the miniature are blue and the other half remains pink. The results of this method is this super easy and massively striking, almost synth-wavy effect, where the pink undershadow almost looks like a neon glow coming from below the miniature. If you want to do a slight remix on this color scheme, or if that bright blue is just a little bit too much for you, then you can follow these same steps, but replace that light blue with a slightly darker one for a similarly striking but slightly darker, perfectly blended synthwave effect. Like I said, this is definitely one of my absolute favorite priming combinations, and if you do decide to use this on one of your miniature painting projects or your armies, then please let me know because I would love to see it. The next matchup is this awesome saturated yellow armor recipe, and it's another one of my favorites because the results look so cool and kind of perfect in a really unexpected way given the color choices. We're going to start in a similar way to our last technique with a generous spray of pink over our usual black base so that the mini looks mostly pink with the recesses remaining a nice dark black. And once that's dry, we're simply going to go back over the top with a more top-down directional spray of yellow so that the highest points of the miniature have the highest concentration of yellow primer. Once it's all dried, the results are an easy, deep and saturated yellow armor effect, which uses the bright pink underneath to create a cool, unique punch of color, but also a strangely rich and well-blended looking orange mid-tone all over the miniature, which ends in a perfectly smooth and dominant yellow highlight. And I reckon that this super easy starting point paired up with some simple recess shading and edge highlighting would definitely make for some of the most striking but also easiest to achieve yellow armor that I have ever seen. If you're a fan of Tyranids, Emperor's Children, or just perfectly blended purple pinky tones in general, then this is going to be your new favorite priming combination. We're going to start over our usual black primer with a generous spray of purple primer, which will cover most of the miniature except for the darkest recesses. Then we're going to apply a slightly smaller zenithal spray of bright pink over the top of the purple in order to highlight the most highest points of the miniature. The result is this gorgeously dark and deep looking purple color scheme which subtly and naturally blends into these super saturated pink tones. Since these colors blend into each other so naturally, you can really push that pink tone on top to make your miniature look as dominantly pink or as dominantly purple as you like. But personally, I like the pink to act as a subtle highlight on top of the miniature, like with this Space Marine, whose color scheme I think would make the perfect easy peasy starting point for a pre-heresy Emperor's Children army. One thing that I always personally struggle with when it comes to painting miniatures is achieving lovely smooth skin tones. So of course I've come up with a few simple primer recipes which will help you out loads if you have just this problem. The first recipe is really fun and effective, and it looks like smooth saturated tan skin. And to make it, we're going to use some pink primer over our black base coat to lightly coat the miniature, whilst as usual leaving the darkest recesses dark. Then we're going to go back over the top of the pink with a heavy-ish zenithal spray of this peachy peach flesh color in order to create a smooth flesh colored gradient all over the whole miniature. This bright pink underneath the dominant flesh color creates a saturated warmth and some really awesome definition and blends around the face and muscle details on the miniatures. But of course, skin comes in all different shades and tones, so it's always great to experiment with different tones, colors, and even levels of saturation in order to create a little bit of variety in your ranks. Like this undead zombie looking skin tone, which I made by using a zenithal spray of dead animal bits over a dark green primer, which looks very, very spooky and I think very cool too. And of course, I couldn't make this video without trying to work out a way to fast pass one of my favorite things to paint en masse, greenskins. So here's a recipe which may help my fellow orc and goblin lovers speed things up a little bit. Over our black primed miniature, we're gonna spray basically the whole mini using a dark green color, whilst also as usual doing our best to preserve those darker recesses. Then using either a lighter yellowy green color, or in my case a pure yellow primer, we're gonna very sparingly apply a zenithal spray from above to make a bright contrasty yellow-green gradient on our miniature. However, please bear in mind that if you are spraying pure yellow over green like I am here, it's important to go quite lightly. Too much yellow over the top of this green will kind of ruin the effect and it'll look more yellow than green, so just a soft amount on top works best. And remember, you can always touch up with a little bit more green to rebalance the color later on if you think it needs it. But yeah, I think this combination is just so easy and it looks absolutely amazing, especially on orcs and goblins, but also on this space marine here, who I think would make a very fetching salamander too. I always encourage playing around with colors as much as possible in any stage of miniature painting, but I really do think that for some reason the priming stage is often overlooked and is just as good a time to experiment as any. And of course, I could go on for hours and hours about all the amazing color combinations that you can achieve with just 2 colors, but I've already shared a few of my own personal favorites that I've discovered whilst just experimenting, so now I guess the final ultimate primer combination is up to you guys. As always, if you have any suggestions for cool color combinations or any tips and tricks for perfect priming, then please pop them in the comment section below so I can see them, or if you're planning on using any of these color combinations on your own painting projects or armies in the future, then let me know, because this has been so much fun and I would love to see it. But I'm afraid that is all we have time for today. As usual, thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for being rogues. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye.